Hey everyone, Professor Hank here. Good to be back with you today. So in this video, we're going deeper into the Python return statement. You probably already know that return is used to send a value back from a function. But did you know that it can return multiple values, or that you can use it to exit a function early without returning anything at all? Let's take a look at how it all works. So let's refresh our memory on how return works in general. So I could create a function called greet, and I can have a parameter name, and I might return an f string that is going to use that parameter to construct the string. So if I do that, and then I create a message variable, and I call greet, and I pass the string Hank as an argument, and then I print out the message, we're going to see that we have hello Hank on the screen. So we've seen this before. Return is sending a value back to the place the function was called. So we saw greet return a string, which we printed. But Python lets us return more than a single string or number. So let's see an example of that. Let's say that I defined a function, get user info, and for this function I won't have any parameters, and I will just create a local variable name, and I'll assign to it Alice, and then a variable age, and I'll assign to it 30, and then country, which I'll assign Portugal. Now I can return all three of those values, all three of those variables. I can do something like this. I can say return name, age, and country. So this is something that we can do in Python, not something you can do easily in C or C++, for example. So if I create a variable info and I assign to it get user info, and then I print info, we're going to get all three of those values, and you'll see Alice, 30, and Portugal. So what we're getting here is a tuple that's being returned by our function getUserInfo. Now, if we want to unpack those values, what we can do instead is we can create three variables, say name, age, and country, and then we can assign to all three variables at the same time what's returned by getUserInfo. So when we do this, the first value being returned by the function will go to the first variable, the second value will go to the second variable, the third value will go to the third variable, and so on. And it's not a requirement that they both have the same name, we're just using them, reusing them for clarity in the video. So if I was to then print name, and then print country, and then print our age, you're going to see all three of those show up on the screen. So now we can take each individual piece of data and use them wherever we need to. So let's see another example where we can return multiple stats from a list. So let's say that I define a function called listStats, and we're going to pass to it a list, and we'll find the sum of the list and the numbers. We will count how many numbers there are in that list by using the len function. We'll then calculate the average, which is a total, divided by the count, and then we can return the total, the count, and the average. So then I'll create a variable called stats, and then I'll assign to it what's returned by listStats, and I'll just pass a list containing 10, 20, and 30 as an argument. So then when I print this out, print stats, we're going to see a tuple containing the total of the numbers, the total number of numbers, and then the average. So let's see that. So that's the total of the numbers, the total number of numbers, and then that average, all in one line. Now, of course, we can break that up as we did in the previous example. So I could do something like this, TCA for total, count, and average, and then I'll print T, I'll print C, and I'll print A. So the total will be assigned to T, the count will be assigned to C, the average will be assigned to A, and then we'll see those values all on separate lines. Now, just because you have a return statement doesn't mean that you actually have to have the function send a value back to where it was called from. So let's see an example of that. So let's say that I had a function called checkAge, and so if the age is less than 0, I'll print, invalid age, and then I'll return. But if the age is not less than 0, then I'll skip over this block, and then I'll go ahead and print that it is a valid age. And I'll print the age. So here, return is not sending back any values. It just says, we're done, stop running this function. And so this is great when you want to handle errors or if you want to skip some unnecessary steps. So here is a practical example of that. So let's do some input validation. So let's say that I have a function, def process payment, and I'll accept a single argument, an amount. And so if the amount is less than or equal to 0, then I'll simply print invalid payment amount and then return. But if the amount is greater than 0, then we're going to skip this block, right? Because that test expression will evaluate to false, and then we'll go ahead and print processing payment of, and then we'll do amount. Points to formatted to decimal places, and we'll put 3 dots there, and then that'll do that. Okay, and so then that'll be that. So then let's run it to see how the function behaves. So if we call process payment, pass it 0, then this is going to show us the invalid payment amount output. And then if we call it and pass 50, then we're going to see, this is valid. And so we're going to see that processing payment of. So let's go ahead and run that. So you can see first example, invalid payment. Second example was valid, processing payment of 50. So this prevents the rest of the function from running if the input isn't valid, and it keeps your code clean and avoids unnecessary work. So let's talk about return versus print versus no return. So in this first example, I'll have a function that is simply going to print out the sum of its arguments. So print A plus B. So this doesn't return anything. The second function is going to return the sum of its arguments, but not actually print anything. So it's just going to say return A plus B. So they both look similar, but there's a key difference. So this print right here only displays a result. It doesn't give any value back to the caller. So you can't reuse or store that value. So we can if we use return sum. So return sum 10, 5, and then if I print the result, no problem, we got our 15, but the print function here doesn't actually return anything. All it does is display stuff on the screen. So with this statement, we can reuse what's returned by sum. So to recap, we can use return to send values back, even multiple values. We can use it without a value, so we can exit our functions early. And you always want to know whether you want to return something or just print it. So that's everything that I have for you in this video. As usual, if you're a student of mine, have any questions about the content of this video or any of the videos in our courses, feel free to email me via Canvas or stop by our Zoom office hours. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.